So maybe we should backtrack a little bit, because we sort of started wham bam into the middle, haven't we?
Yeah, why not?
So let's think about, just in the whole sphere of things, yoga anatomy, and if people are seeking a knowledge of yoga anatomy, how is it going to help them with the practice? How is that going to translate in their practice? In what ways do you see that?
Yeah. It's a good question. I ask it of myself regularly. I mean, I teach it.
Yeah.
Actually, in when I did the yoga anatomy videos in 2008, I actually say that in the introduction.
Yeah.
And I remember the editor was like, "We're taking that out, right?" And I'm like, "No, leave it," because one should be asking a question of why they're doing what they're doing,
for sure.
and what it's for. I think I say there, a sincere practitioner of yoga in the big picture, they don't need to know any anatomy.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter. However, I teach it, so I have to make a good argument for it.
Let's have it.
It's almost like being a chef and growing your own vegetables and your own herbs and spices.
Yeah.
Right? There's an appreciation then for the food that you're cooking and making and how you're preparing it and the energy and the love you're putting into it. And so, with asana practice, you're using your body. And if you look deeply into the body, it becomes very spiritual. I mean, just go ahead and look up, how a muscle actually contracts. Like on a cellular level, I mean, it's just unbelievable. It's like magic.
Yeah.
And so it gets you very close to spirituality, just like anything you look into, as it should. Now, backing out from that, there's the practical side of it as well, and stuff we've already talked about. This more objective point of view of what's going on in your body and making decisions based on that is definitely fed by having a good understanding of your own anatomy. Right? Like, what is it that I'm actually doing? What is the effect of that?
Yeah.
Because then you have these visuals in your mind of what fits together and how it functions together. And hopefully it's an integrated way of seeing the body, because if it's piece by piece, you'll be missing all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
But when you have those sort of visuals in your mind, and you can imagine what's going on in your body, you might accentuate certain things, or de-accentuate.
Sounds
things.
good to me.
Yeah, right. De-accentuate
American
things.
word.
Yeah, we'll just make them up as we go along. That's what we typically do in America. And it's even more important as a teacher, because I'm looking at students' bodies and I'm trying to see them for who they are.
Yeah.
Before I start imposing all of my ideas of how the practice is supposed to be, I really need to observe their anatomy, because I'm watching them move, so that's what I'm seeing. As objectively as possible, how does their anatomy move or not move?
Yeah.
Or in what way does it move? Is it integrated? Is it unintegrated? So everything I've learned about anatomy is, tied into how I see people practicing, and then what I decide to do, hopefully based on that objective point of view of who they are, and less on my biased point of view of how I think the practice should be.
Yeah.
And I like to think it happens for me as a practitioner as well, because I also strive through the anatomy to have an integrated practice, integrated movement, efficiency of movement. Not that the anatomy isn't there to sort of tie you into thinking about what's right or what's wrong, or what's good or what's bad.
Mm-hmm.
But feeding your experience of the practice.
I know my wife, she says to me, I can see you're analyzing too much in the postures. I can almost see your brain working. And I can see that in myself. And I think that's the resistance that some people feel about, if they take on too much information, it's going to spoil their stillness in the posture or their focus. And I can sort of see that in myself. I'm constantly thinking, okay, you externally rotate that hip. And,
I don't do that. Just so
you don't do that?
No.
So that's pretty cool. So you take your knowledge and subconsciously you just do it.
Well, the body's going to move.
Yeah.
It's more like we're expressing the postures with our anatomy. We're not trying to make our anatomy fit into a particular posture. That's where trouble starts to happen. We want to embody the posture in a way that we're expressing it with our own anatomy. because what happens is otherwise you get stuck in this idea that there's always something wrong, or there's always something to fix, perhaps. Maybe not that something's wrong, but maybe everything's just fine the way it is.
The way it is, leave it alone.
You know, yeah. I mean, this is where most people intersect with anatomy. Like even those who really don't want to do it, you know, relative to, you know, thinking about things too much. And I can say more about that, but they want to intersect with it when they're injured or when they can't do something. Those are the points of intersection that are most common. That all of a sudden people start Googling stuff and they start self-diagnosing themselves, and it's unfortunate. Sometimes they get it right. Mostly they probably get it wrong. Yeah. But it's for people who think it's going to cause them to think too much. They might have a habit of thinking too much already.
That would be me too, I suppose. Yeah. So maybe it's just I'm thinking about that instead of thinking about what I'm going to be shopping for or whatever.
Right. I guess that's better. That's just a step in the right direction, isn't it? Yeah.
It's just, I think sometimes when you're thinking of asanas and you look at the detail of an asana and you say, okay, let's say Trikonasana, for instance, and maybe you'll disagree with what I'm going to say anyway, but let's...
I'll try not to.
Let's say we've stepped forward with our left leg, and we might say that, okay, if we externally rotate our right hip, it might allow us to stack our hips better one over the other. And so then that involves some sort of conscious thought process, you know, which then takes us a little deeper into the posture.
But I think everybody goes through this process of figuring out the posture, right? When you first start, you have to think about everything. You don't have a choice, right? There's no way not to, because you haven't done it before, so you have to figure it out. Maybe you're not using anatomical words in your mind, but you're feeling it out or thinking about it, or maybe somebody says try to turn your foot that way or that way. It's the same thing. But once you establish a pattern of doing that, you can drop the thinking part.
Okay.
You set up.
You start with and get the patterns going.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then, like, relax into it for a while. And that means like a year in my mind at least.
Okay.
And then you're really exploring it. 2 days.
Too quick.
yeah, too quick. And in terms of thinking too much, yoga isn't about not thinking. It's about constant. It's about many things, really. But having knowledge that you have behind you as you go into a practice or you try to make something happen. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. That'd be like saying, well, Guruji shouldn't have read too much philosophy. Because then he'll be thinking about it too much when he gives, conference. Yeah. I mean, that's not true, right?
No, you're building on your knowledge base something, and I think you draw on a lot of stuff subconsciously, like you were saying before. Yeah. It's in there, and you're drawing on. You don't necessarily have to process it in the front of your mind.
Right. Or it might be the difference of, there's mental knowledge, and then there's experiential knowledge. So we always use that mental knowledge as a base to have an experience from, then test it in the real world. So in that sense, from subconscious to conscious, in a way. So once you learn it all, it doesn't mean you have to think about everything all the time. But it will color your experience nonetheless.
Yeah.